There's a folder on your computer. Maybe it's called Ideas, maybe it's called Projects, maybe it has no name at all, just a pile of documents you haven't opened in months, and every time you see it, you feel a little ashamed. The half-written business plan, the Etsy shop you designed but never launched, the podcast you recorded 3 episodes of, the app concept with 14 pages of notes and 0 lines of code. You've told yourself the same story for years. I'm someone who starts things and never finishes them. But what if I told you that graveyard of abandoned ideas isn't evidence of your failure? What if it's actually your most valuable asset and you've been misreading it your entire life? Here's where it gets interesting, because psychology actually has a name for people like you. You're not lazy, you're not broken. You're what researchers call a multipotentialite, a term coined by writer Emily Wapnick to describe people whose brains are literally wired to absorb, synthesize, and connect across multiple domains simultaneously. Think of it this way. Most people's brains are like a deep well. They go straight down into one subject and pull from that single concentrated source. That's the specialist. Society loves specialists. Society built itself around specialists. But your brain is a river delta. It spreads wide. It feeds multiple ecosystems at once. And yes, on the surface, it looks messy, chaotic, like it's going nowhere. But deltas are extraordinarily fertile ground. Now let's add something else into the mix: divergent thinking. This is the cognitive ability to generate multiple solutions from a single problem. It's what psychologists measure when they're testing for raw creative potential, and studies consistently show that people with higher idea generation rates, even when those ideas go unfinished, score dramatically higher on innovation benchmarks than people who hyper-focus from the very start. Your graveyard isn't a cemetery, it's a laboratory. And then there's one more idea I want you to hold on to: the Medici effect. Franz Johansson wrote about this phenomenon where the most explosive innovations in history happened at the intersection of completely unrelated fields. The Renaissance flourished because artists, scientists, poets, and engineers were all in the same room cross-pollinating ideas. You have been building that intersection inside your own mind for years. Every abandoned project taught you something: a language, a market, a skill, a human truth. And those fragments didn't disappear when you closed the tab. They stayed. They compounded. They've been quietly building something you haven't named yet. But let's be honest with each other for a second, because the graveyard isn't just about unfinished projects, is it? It's about what those projects meant to you when you started them. That business plan, you were going to change your family's financial situation. That podcast, you were going to finally be heard. That app idea, you genuinely thought for about 3 beautiful weeks that this was it, this was the thing, and then it fell apart. And the grief of that, it's not dramatic grief, it's quiet grief, the kind Carl Jung called the shadow, the parts of ourselves we bury not because they're bad, but because the world kept telling us they weren't practical, weren't focused enough, weren't serious. Somewhere along the way, you learned that your natural way of moving through the world, wide-eyed, hungry for everything, unable to stay in one lane, was a flaw. Maybe a teacher told you to pick one thing. Maybe a parent called you scattered. Maybe you just watched the world reward people who finished things and drew your own brutal conclusion: I am the problem. And you carried that conclusion like it was fact. You let it sit in your chest, heavy and quiet, every time you opened a new tab, started a new notebook, got excited about a new idea that you were already half convinced you'd abandon. Nietzsche wrote that one must have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. I think about that a lot when I think about people like you, because the chaos you've been apologizing for, that is the raw material, that is the star. You just haven't learned yet how to let it dance. So let me ask you something, and I really want you to sit with this. What part of your real self did you have to shrink to make other people more comfortable with who you were? Because the answer is usually hiding somewhere in that folder you haven't opened in months. So, what does this actually look like in real life? Because it shows up in ways that are subtle, specific, and so easy to misread as personal failure. You might find yourself getting intensely excited about a new idea and spending hours researching it, then waking up 3 days later with the energy completely gone. Not because you're flaky, because your brain already extracted the core insight it needed and quietly moved on. You might find yourself with an unusually strong ability to understand people fast, their motivations, their fears, their patterns, because you've touched so many different worlds that you've essentially built an internal database of human behavior without even realizing it. You might struggle in jobs with rigid, repetitive structures, not because you lack discipline, because your nervous system is calibrated for novelty and meaning, and routine without purpose feels like slow suffocation. You've probably made money in multiple random ways over the years, a freelance gig here, a side project there, and people around you are quietly impressed even when you can't see the thread connecting any of it. You're also likely the person everyone calls when they need a creative solution, because you can pull from 15 different mental models simultaneously and hand someone an answer that a narrow specialist would never have reached. And you feel most alive at the beginning of things, the inception, the possibility, and you've spent years believing that makes you uncommitted, when actually it makes you a visionary. Here's the twist, though. You weren't born ashamed of this. You were taught to be. And everything you've been calling a character flaw, it's a skill set that the modern economy is desperate for right now. Portfolio careers, hybrid roles, creative entrepreneurship, the world is finally building infrastructure for people exactly like you. The timing isn't a coincidence. It's almost like the world was waiting for you to catch up to yourself. So, what do you actually do with all of this? First, stop trying to finish everything. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but not every idea is meant to be a finished product. Some ideas are research, some are training, some exist purely to teach you a skill you'll need for the idea that comes in 3 years. Give yourself permission to let some things be exactly what they are, stepping stones, not failures. Second, go back through that graveyard with completely fresh eyes. That folder, that notebook, those voice memos you recorded at 2 a.m. Don't look for finished projects, look for patterns. What problems kept reappearing? What audiences? What emotions? What kept pulling you back even after you thought you'd moved on? Because somewhere in those fragments there's a through line, a niche, a business, a body of work that is uniquely yours because no specialist could have built it. Only someone who wandered through as many rooms as you did could have assembled it. Third, find your minimum viable finish. You don't need to complete the whole thing. You need to complete enough of it to put it in front of people and get a real response. A landing page, a single essay, a 60-second video. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is contact with reality, because that contact is what transforms a graveyard into a gold mine. Here's what I want you to walk away with today. Your graveyard is not evidence of who you failed to become. It is the most honest archive of everything you've been curious enough to try. And in a world drowning in people who played it safe, stayed in their lane, and slowly forgot what it felt like to be genuinely lit up by a new idea, that curiosity is rare. That curiosity is valuable. That curiosity is the product. You aren't broken. You're just adapted to a world that hadn't caught up to you yet. It's catching up now. And that folder on your desktop, don't delete it. Open it, because somewhere inside it is the version of you that was always supposed to win. They just needed you to finally stop calling them a failure. Let's talk about this in the comments. Which idea in your graveyard still has a pulse? Drop it below. I'm genuinely curious. And if this hit differently than you expected, share it with someone in your life who needs to hear it most.